There's a strange, cold math to betrayal. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a single, catastrophic event. It's an accumulation, a debt that accrues in secret, transaction by silent transaction, until one day you check the balance and realize you're bankrupt. My moment of clarity, my personal audit, happened in the chaotic, overwarm living room of my parents' house, surrounded by the clatter of the annual family reunion. The air was thick with the smell of my mom's pot roast and my sister's expensive perfume. The sounds were a familiar symphony of forced cheerfulness. Dad's booming laugh at a joke that wasn't funny, my aunt's high-pitched chatter, and my brother-in-law, Seth, holding court by the snack table. I felt like I always did at these things. A ghost at my own family's party. Present, but not really seen. Useful, but not truly wanted. I was leaning against the wall, trying to make myself smaller, when Seth clapped me on the shoulder, his hand heavy and possessive. "Mason, my man," he boomed, his breath smelling faintly of beer. "Good to see you. Glad you could make it. Wouldn't be a party without our favorite sponsor." He laughed. A few relatives nearby chuckled politely. I gave him a tight, forced smile. Sponsor. That was a new one. Usually, they were more subtle. Later, while trying to find a quiet corner, my sister Sarah cornered me by the overflowing coat rack. "Hey," she said, not meeting my eye, already scrolling through her phone. "My car's making a funny noise again. The mechanic said it might be the transmission. Just letting you know." She didn't ask for help. She stated a problem. Because in our family's unspoken language, her problems had always been my responsibility to solve. But the real moment, the one that shattered the glass, came after dinner. I was feeling a gnawing anxiety in my gut. Earlier that day, I'd made a large transfer to my investment account. A big step for me. I just wanted to see if it had gone through, to feel that small, private thrill of building something for myself. I found a quiet hallway, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. I stared at the screen. My thumb, slick with sweat, hovered over the refresh button. I'd already hit it 3 times. It still showed the same number. $4.87. $4.87. That couldn't be right. It was impossible. Yesterday, just yesterday morning, I had over $14,000 in that account. Savings I had scraped and clawed for over 3 years. My heart started to pound, a frantic, trapped burr against my ribs. I refreshed it again and again. $4.87. $4.87. $4.87. 14,000. The words were a dry whisper, lost in my throat. "You, what?" My voice cracked. A sound so small, so broken, I barely recognized it as my own. From the living room, a sound floated towards me. Ada. Laughter. Sarah's laugh. Clear and unbothered. I walked back into the room, my phone held out in front of me like a piece of evidence I didn't yet understand. My legs felt like they were moving through water. "Sarah?" I said, my voice shaking. "Seth." Seth leaned against the fridge, a fresh beer in his hand. That smug, lazy half-smile was glued to his face. "You seriously mad about this?" He drawled. "Relax. We needed it more than you." I blinked. The world seemed to narrow to a sharp, painful point. You took it." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Sarah said from the couch. She looked completely unbothered, legs curled under her, sipping a glass of wine. She hadn't even looked up from her phone. "It's not like we stole it. We're family." "Family. You drained my account." I repeated, the words tasting like metal. "You drained my entire savings." "It's not draining if we're going to pay it back," Seth added with a shrug. Eventually, my mouth opened, but no sound came out. My gaze darted across the room, searching for an alley, for a single sane person. I looked at my mom, sitting in her armchair, her knitting needles clicking softly. She hadn't even glanced up. "Mom," I said, louder this time, my voice desperate. "Did you know about this?" She sighed. A heavy, put-upon sigh. The kind of sigh she used when I asked her to please stop leaving wet towels on the floor. She finally looked at me. Her eyes clouded with disappointment, not in them, but in me. "Nice. Sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. "You're always so sensitive. You have a good job. No mortgage, no kids. You live alone. You're fine. You're fine." I was fine, so it was fine to rob me. So that justifies stealing from me. Language, Mason. My dad muttered from his recliner, not looking up from the game on his phone. I turned back to Sarah, a cold fury starting to burn through the shock. How did you even get access?" She finally looked at me. Her eyes flat and unapologetic. "You left your info on the family computer last time you were here. Maybe next time. Don't log in and walk away, honestly. It's kind of your own fault." My own fault. I stopped myself. My fingers curled into tight fists at my sides. My breathing had gone shallow. Each breath a sharp little sip of poisoned air. "You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be," Seth said, taking a long drink of his beer. "It's not like we wasted it on nonsense. We paid rent, bought groceries. Survived. You didn't ask." I whispered. "We didn't think we had to." Sarah snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "You've been paying for stuff for years. What's the difference if the money comes through you, or from you?" There it was, the truth of it. The philosophy that had governed my entire life without me ever realizing it. I was not a person. I was a utility, a pipeline. I picked up my bag from the floor. Slowly, deliberately. No one moved. No one apologized. No one even looked surprised. They just watched me. A mild curiosity in their eyes, as if wondering what this slightly entertaining interruption was all at. "You're leaving already?" Mom asked, her knitting needles clicking again. "Yep," I said, zipping my coat. The sound was unnaturally loud in the suddenly quiet room. "But don't worry. I'll be in touch. Don't be like that." Sarah rolled her eyes. "We needed it more than you. That's just facts." I reached for the doorknob. My hand was shaking again. I paused. "Then you won't mind," I said, my voice low and shaking with a cold fury I'd never felt before. "What's coming next?" They laughed. Seth let out a short, barking laugh. Sarah just smirked and took another sip of wine. But outside, something had already started. The ground had begun to tremble, and they were the only ones who couldn't feel it. "Hey, you okay?" It was my cousin Jen, her voice a soft island of concern in my raging internal sea. She'd caught up to me outside as I marched to my car, my fists clenched, my jaw locked so tight it ached. I muttered, yanking open the car door. "I heard what Sarah said," she added carefully, her eyes full of a pity I didn't want. "That wasn't right, Mason." I didn't answer, because if I opened my mouth to speak, I was afraid I would just scream. The thing is, this wasn't the first time. This was just the loudest. For years, I've been the responsible one. The one with the stable job, the one who didn't have kids, the one who lived in a small apartment and didn't take lavish vacations. Somehow, that made me the family wallet. It started small, like a leak, a single drop. Sarah forgot to pay her phone bill once. I covered it. "Just $100. I'll pay you back next week." She never did. Then Seth lost his job at the warehouse. Just need a little something to get through the month. Man, he'd said, $2,000. I never saw a cent of it. Then there was the birthday gift for their daughter, my niece. A brand new, top-of-the-line tablet. I had offered to chip in, except I didn't. When I showed up to the party, they just handed me the bill. We knew you'd want to cover this for her, Mom had said with a brilliant smile. And every single time, they made it sound like I owed it to them. Like my success was not my own, but a resource to be shared. You're lucky, Mason. Mom would say, her voice sweet but with an edge of steel underneath. You don't have the struggles your sister does. God gave you ease so you could share it. Family means supporting each other. Dad chimed in more than once, usually when he needed help with a car repair. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for us. Translation: we gave you life. Now give us your paycheck. I never asked for anything in return. Not when I was laid off for 6 months during the dot-com bust and lived off rice and boiled eggs. Not when I skipped vacations for 3 straight years just to rebuild the savings they kept chipping away at. Not even when I helped pay off Sarah and Seth's credit card debt 2 years ago. A massive, 5-figure sum they'd racked up on designer clothes and expensive dinners. They never paid me back. They never even said thank you. I replayed the phone call from last week in my head. Sarah, you still coming to the family reunion? She'd asked, her voice bored. Yeah, I'd replied. Should I bring something? Her answer came quick, followed by a short laugh. Just bring yourself and your card. I thought it was a joke. Now I know it wasn't. It was a business plan. For 2 days, I existed in a state of suspended animation. A cold, quiet rage simmered beneath the surface of my skin. I went to work. I answered emails. I fixed people's software problems. And all the while, a part of my brain was working in the background, running calculations, pulling up files, connecting dots. I wasn't just angry. I was awake, and the world looked different, sharper, colder. Then the call came. Sarah. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. Then Seth texted, just call her man. She's freaking out. I finally picked up on the 5th try. Mason, she started, her voice low and shaky. I could picture her pacing her messy living room. We have a problem. Oh, we do. I said, the sarcasm dripping from every syllable. Look, don't be like that. Something happened. I stayed silent. She continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The power company came today. We're behind on the bill, like way behind. And they're threatening to shut it off if we don't pay by Monday. No. She paused, waiting for me to jump in. To fix it. I said nothing. So, she finally said, the frustration creeping into her voice. So, we need your help. I laughed. A short, bitter, ugly sound. You drained my life savings, and now you're asking for more. It wasn't just for us, she snapped, her voice rising. We used some of it to help Mom and Dad, too. Dad's car broke down last month. Remember? No, I said flatly. I don't remember. Because no one told me. Because you always say no when it's not a quote-unquote emergency. Sarah, I said, my voice turning to ice. This isn't just messed up. It's a crime. What you did is a felony. You're being dramatic, she shrieked. It's family. You didn't ask me? We didn't think you'd mind. You've always helped. That's what you're for, right? There it was again. That phrase. That's what you're for. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my laptop open beside me. I wasn't just going over moments. I was digging. I was an archaeologist of my own financial ruin. I went through 5 years of bank statements, I highlighted every transfer, every Zella payment, every time I'd covered a bill. I compiled them into a single, beautiful, terrifying spreadsheet. The favors, the small transfers, the way Mom always said, "You're the strong one." The way Sarah rolled her eyes if I hesitated for even a second. They never saw me as a brother, a son, a person, just a resource, a deep, seemingly bottomless well they could draw from whenever they were thirsty. The next day, Mom called. The official summons. "We need to talk." She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about the missing money. "We're planning a family dinner. Just us. Come over tonight." My stomach dropped. I knew what this was. Not an apology. An ambush. An attempt to reestablish the old order. To put me back in my box. Part of me. And the old, tired part wanted to say no. To just block them all and disappear. But the other part, the new, cold, awake part, wanted to see it through. I wanted to see their faces when they realized the well was dry, and that I was the one who had just sealed it with concrete. When I stepped inside the house, the scene was set. A perfect little stage for a family drama. Mom was setting the table, clinking plates with more force than necessary. Dad sat on the couch, flipping through channels with a bored expression. Sarah stood by the window, arms folded, jaw tight. And Seth, my dear brother-in-law, lounged at the end of the dining table like he was the king of a castle I had paid for. "Well, look who finally showed up," Sarah said, her voice dry as dust. I dropped my duffel bag near the door without a word. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "Let's just get this over with," I muttered. "Good." Seth grinned, leaning back in his chair. "Maybe we can finally stop pretending you were robbed." "I was robbed," I said, sitting down at the table. "That was the cue." Mom cleared her throat, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mason," she began, her voice dripping with practiced sincerity. "We know you're upset, but you have to understand. We were struggling. We didn't have any other options. Sarah and Seth, they were drowning." Dad added, finally turning off the TV, "And you've always been the stable one. We knew we could count on you. You didn't ask." I said, my voice cold and hard, "You took. That's not family, that's theft." Sarah rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "You're being so dramatic. We didn't spend it on crap. We used it where it mattered." "No." I reached into my bag, pulled out a thick, printed spreadsheet, and slammed it on the center of the table. The sound made my mother jump. "Page 1. I said, pointing, $1,472 on makeup from Sephora. Page 2. Over $900 on takeout and DoorDash in 3 weeks. And page 4. My personal favorite. $2,300 to pay off your car loan." "Seth, didn't think I'd check the routing numbers, did you?" Seth leaned forward, his face dark. "You went through our accounts." "Oh, I did more than that," I said, pulling out my laptop. I opened it. The screen lit up with a neat, color-coded breakdown of their lives, funded by me. Every charge, every transfer, every late-night AM withdrawal from our supposedly joint account. I compiled every single transaction, and then I filed a report. "A report with who?" Dad asked, his voice cautious, "With the bank's fraud department, to start, and then, just for good measure, with the police." Sarah's eyes widened. "You didn't." "I did." "You called the police on us," she shrieked, jumping to her feet. I turned to my mother, who was staring at me. "And wow me." Her face a mask of disbelief. "Still think this is just family business. Mom, this is insane." Dad snapped, his face turning red. You want to put your own sister in jail over a misunderstanding. She put herself there," I said. And then came the knock. Not a polite little tap. 3 hard, heavy, official pounds against the front door. Sarah went pale. Seth stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. Mom gasped and backed away, her hand flying to her mouth. Dad froze, his face a perfect picture of a man whose bluff had just been called. "Open up!" A voice shouted from outside, firm and commanding. "Financial Crimes Unit. Knock, knock, knock." Seth turned to me. His voice a low, desperate hiss. I looked at the chaos I had unleashed, at the family that had pushed me, Mesha, and pushed me, Agando, and pushed me, Mir, until I had no choice but to push back. And I walked to the door and opened it. 3 agents stepped inside, their jackets marked with bold letters. One carried a clipboard, the second, a tablet. The third just surveyed the room, his eyes missing nothing. "You Mason Carver?" the lead agent asked. "Yes. Thank you for your cooperation. We'll take it from here." Mom covered her mouth, a sob escaping. Sarah dropped back into her chair like her legs had given out. Seth stood there, dumbstruck, a deer in the headlights of an oncoming train. One of the agents turned toward them. "Sarah and Seth Miller, you're listed as parties of interest in an open case of financial fraud and identity theft." "Identity theft," Mom cried, finding her voice. "He's our son, our family." The agent didn't blink. "Family ties don't make an illegal activity legal, ma'am. We didn't steal anything." Sarah cried, her voice high and thin. "We had a right. He always helped us." "He always?" "Thinking you're entitled to someone's money doesn't make it yours," another agent said calmly. "Please remain seated." I just stood back and watched. For the first time in my life, they weren't talking over me. Anas. They weren't mocking me. Odd. Me. They weren't laughing at me. Nah. Amy. They were silent. And they were scared. Mom turned to me then, her face a mess of tears and desperation. "Mason, please," she whispered. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We were just desperate. You've always been the strong one. You're the only one we could count on." I looked her dead in the eyes. I looked at the woman who had taught me that love was transactional, that my worth was measured in what I could provide. And I said the 2 words I should have said years ago. "You don't get to cry now." She covered her mouth and sobbed. I grabbed my bag from the floor and turned to the lead agent. "I'll be outside if you need anything else." And this time, when I walked toward the door, they didn't stop me. "Hammond, Covington." I stepped out into the cold night air. I didn't look back. For once, there was no guilt, no drama, no one shrieking my name. Just the quiet hum of my own freedom, and the faint, beautiful sound of flashing blue and red lights reflecting off the houses across the street. Peace is a strange, quiet thing. You imagine it'll feel like a celebration. Fireworks, champagne, some grand, cinematic victory lap. But for me, peace sounded like my phone not ringing. It sounded like making a cup of coffee in the morning without a knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering what new crisis had erupted overnight. It sounded like silence. A glorious, uninterrupted, earned silence. The 3 months after that night were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional reconstruction. Sarah and Seth tried to fight it, of course. Their lawyer, a slick man in an ill-fitting suit, tried to paint me as a vindictive, unstable family member lashing out over a simple loan. Then my lawyer presented the spreadsheet, the 5 years of documented financial drainage, the fraud report from the bank. The evidence was overwhelming. They took a plea deal, probation, a permanent mark on their records, and a court-ordered restitution plan that they would likely be paying for the rest of their lives. My mother sent a letter, 10 pages, handwritten on floral stationery. A rambling, self-pitying epic about how things got out of hand, how they never meant to hurt me, how she hoped I could see the bigger picture. "We just assumed you'd always be there," she wrote in one particularly revealing line. "That's what good sons do." That line stuck with me. No, because it said everything. Not, "We were wrong." Not, "You didn't deserve that." Just, "You were supposed to stay quiet and keep giving." I didn't write back. I didn't call. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel a single flicker of guilt about it. I moved. New apartment. New state. No more accidental drop-ins. No more surprise visits. I even changed my number. It's funny how much better you perform at your job, how much clearer you think, when you're not secretly juggling your sister's car payments and your mom's overdue utility bills. My boss, noticing the change, offered me a promotion. I took it. One morning, a letter showed up at my new P.O. box. No return address. Inside, a check for $1,200 and a handwritten note. I left him. "You were right. I was scared, but watching what you did, it gave me the courage to walk away, too. This is for everything you paid for Ellie. The tablet, the rent, the clothes. I am. Thank you for being the example I needed. Kelly." Thank you for being the example I needed, Kelly. Seth's sister. I read it twice. Then I sat down at my quiet kitchen table, and I cried. Not out of sadness. Not out of pain. But because for the first time, someone in that circle saw me. And not as a wallet, not as a scapegoat, but as a person. As an example. People ask me sometimes, the few friends I've led back into my new, quiet life, "Do you regret it?" And the answer is simple. No. I regret waiting so long. I regret every sleepless night, every canceled vacation, every tight budget I lived under while they dined out and posted about #family vibes on Instagram. I regret the way I made myself small so they could feel big. I regret all the times I stayed silent when I should have said, "You're crossing a line." But do I regret standing up, burning it all down to save myself? Never. My therapist once asked me, "And why did it take you so long to say no?" And I said, because I thought that saying no meant I didn't love them. She nodded, and then she said something I'll never forget. "Mason, saying no is how you teach people how to love you back. And sometimes, it's how you finally learn to love yourself." The other day, I ran into someone from my old high school. She said, "Hey, I heard about what happened with your family." That's wild. I braced myself for judgment, for pity. But instead, she just smiled and added, "I thanked her." And I walked away feeling a little taller. Sarah and Seth are struggling. Last I heard, Seth lost his job. Sarah's working 2 part-time gigs. Mom and Dad are apparently blaming outside influences for tearing the family apart. They still don't get it. I didn't tear anything apart. I just stopped holding together the pieces that were already broken.